Today's guest is Thomas Nobbs, one of Canada's top rising marathoners. He's run 63 minutes for the half, 2:15 for the marathon. He's chasing the dream of LA 2028. He's doing all this while balancing 200-kilometer training weeks with a full-time job. In this conversation, we dig into the highs and lows of his journey from youth national titles to struggling with injury and red S in college, and what it takes to rebuild and keep believing at the elite level. If you've ever wondered how an athlete pushes through doubt to chase the biggest goals in our sport, I hope you find out here. Welcome back to the Fast and Free podcast. I'm Brant Stachel. I'm an endurance coach, a registered psychotherapist, and mental performance specialist. On this show, I try to go beyond the surface of splits and training logs to explore the deeper side of endurance performance, where physiology can meet psychology, and where the pursuit of excellence is as much as about mindset as it is mileage. Every episode, I try to bring you conversations with athletes, experts, and coaches who are all chasing their goals at every level, from first-time marathoners to Olympians. Today, I'm joined by an athlete I know very well. I'm fortunate to be Thomas's longtime coach. As noted, he's one of Canada's fastest rising marathoners. He trains at an elite level while balancing a full-time career. He often logs more than 200 kilometers, about 120 miles a week. And he's part of the new wave of Canadian distance runners chasing international standards and major breakthroughs. In our conversation today, Thomas shares his journey from being a precocious high school champion to the setbacks and injuries of red S in college, and now rebuilding stronger as a professional marathoner. We talk about the mental battles with elite training, the solitude he has as high mileage weeks solo, and the strategies he developed to manage the self-doubt, to navigate the setbacks, and consistently line up ready to perform. For athletes at every level, his story is proof that consistency, perspective, and process matter just as much, if not more, than raw talent. This was a candid and inspiring conversation, and I'm excited for you to hear it. Let's dive in. All right. Hey, man. How's it going?
Good. How's your morning been?
Yeah. Not bad. Yeah, I was prepping for this and getting a little work done. I'm sure you already ran.
Yeah, just did. Feeling good
Yeah.
before Thursday. But it'll
Yeah,
be fun.
good. So, why don't we, kind of go through your story a little bit here? I think you've got a pretty unique story starting, from early kid and some family connections to running and stuff to obviously where you are now. So maybe if you can kind of tee up our listeners as to, why you're somebody maybe they should continue listening to for the rest of this episode with, how you kind of got into running and what that journey's looked like starting then.
Yeah, born and raised in Vancouver. I just was like every other kid, interested in soccer. Soccer's really big in Vancouver. Everyone wants to be a soccer mom, soccer dad, and my parents were both like very avid runners. My dad represented some Pan American teams for Australia, and I think some state teams, and raced internationally against guys like Seb Coe and stuff like that. So yeah, he was pretty serious. I guess you could call him like semi pro or part of the elite category. And then my mom was just a absolute mileage monster. Never really raced much, but she ran every single day. She still basically runs every single day of her life. That's kind of their history. But they were like, yeah, we're not gonna push the kid into it. And I don't know. I just happened to find my way into running, and then just joined my first team when I was in grade 3, and was clearly like very good, and then started to take it pretty seriously from a very early age, and then did won some youth nationals in grade 9, grade 11, and then just from there went to UW, UBC, joined some senior Pan Am teams, and now running the marathon, and we're training for that. So it's definitely been maybe the wildest roller coaster ride, throughout that process. And I think I've been throughout the process. There's certain times where I've been like the most intense guy on the start line, but I've also, learned to, step away from that a little bit over time.
Yeah, and speaking of your parents, who I've met a bunch of times, they're lovely. They are truly your biggest fans, I would say. Your dad also owned a running store for quite some time.
Yeah. Owned a running store, so I grew up there. Was working shifts in the back room, like arranging the stock and all the shoe boxes, and then selling on the run store, which has been, they still help me out, send me shoes and stuff like that, and I still represent, try to praise the work that they do all the time in Vancouver.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I know when I was out there, I supported them too, and they are a great local shop. So glad to see that that's continued on even after your dad is retired now. So,
Yeah.
can we pick up? I think it was 20 16 was your kind of your first youth title. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think actually even before that, like I think 2014, I was grade 9. I think that was my first youth title, winning the steeple, and then I
Yep.
think following that 2016 was the other year as well.
2016. Okay. And so, in our sport, sometimes being really good young it's great in the moment, right? But it can be detrimental long term. I think if you look back over your career and see other youth or junior champions that you've kind of competed against and such, some are still in the sport, some aren't, right? And to be clear, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that's true, right? But for you, as someone who had that early success and is still in it, obviously competing at a very high level with what you're trying to do, and we'll talk about that. But can you talk about some of the feelings, emotions, pressures, and such that happened with that success at a young age?
There's a book, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which talks about how like if in grade 3, if you're like the fastest guy in school, it's like you're the guy. So it's like you're not even the guy in like the sport world, but you're the guy socially too. And then just like early on, like everyone just knows like you're the running guy. Like it's like, oh, you're going to the Olympics. It's like, okay, well, like I'm freaking in grade 5 or grade 6 or something like that. And it just so basically your entire identity is built around that, regardless if you want it to be or not. Like you can't, I don't know, it feels like you can't show up to practice and just have an off day. It feels like you can't show up to a race and just have a mediocre race. And even until recently, it's hard for me to be like, oh, this is just like kind of a race to test fitness, but more for training. Like that's kind of like a hard thing for me to reconcile. And then I think, through that process, like I think I was really good in grade 6 and 7. Puberty hit. I got destroyed in grade 8. Grade 8 was so brutal. I just remember getting it to like the final BC provincial championship, and we were doing the 800, and some guy, his name was Nathan at the time. He was just a 100-meter guy, and he was stepping up to the 800, obliterates the field, and that was like one event that I used to be so good at, and it's like so demoralizing. And then you go through a whole build of like cross country being like, wow, I suck and I got to work twice as hard. But I think I just, that sort of mentality, like even from the wins and the biggest losses in a season, like grade 8 got destroyed, doubled down, worked like 10 times harder. Grade 9, I think I got I don't know if it was the BC stadium record or BC record, and then won the youth 2K steeple title. And I think after that, it was like the same thing. Like I still came back and I started working twice as hard, So it's just, you kind of have those expectations. Like you have to keep rising to the occasion and doing more. And so more and more became the theme. And then, with coaches over time and yourself included, sometimes the main message was basically just every week, like, by the way, reminder, put it on a billboard in front of your head, like less is more. Less is more in training. And you don't always have to do twice as much to keep progressing over time.
So, and I think what's really interesting about that, it's a very hard lesson because there's duality to that idea about doing more, right? Or maybe better put it, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because obviously you need to do progressively more in smart distributions across the lifespan of being an athlete to get better. You can't just stay static with your training and get better, right? But I think, and I know this, but you've probably also had some negatives in your career because of that attitude, right? And so if you look back, maybe we transitioned to, end of high school, going to college, you went to one of the premier programs at the time, and now again too, right? University of Washington. What was that like, kind of with that mentality, going from being a really good Canadian youth junior to a scholarship athlete at one of the biggest middle distance at the time schools in the U.S.?
You're always chasing that feeling like you're working really hard, but then you are pushing yourself to be at the front, to be like noticed, to get like that recognition from a team perspective. And very much so, like you just can't you just can't keep doing that as a whole. And especially going to college, like I think I came into college not only as not the fastest guy, but also like doing the least amount of mileage. I was coming in injured at the time, and so it's a really weird experience to go from being told you're really special when you come on like a visit to like a college campus, and like the coach is hyping you up, and everything's personalized to you from start to finish, and this multi-day experience going down to Seattle. And then, you're showing up as the injured kid who's like somewhat forgotten, and may not be getting the attention you dreamed of or you thought that was like normal, especially compared to high school, where it's like you had a team of like 10 other guys you're training with, and like usually if you were one of the 5 like consistently showing up, like naturally you got way more attention. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers that necessarily, but I think from an attention perspective, it's like sort of selfish that you're just like, oh, I expect to continually get that attention, and that gratification, and then sometimes it doesn't come, and expectation versus reality just makes you really question what you're doing, and then you try to rely on what do you know to get better, and sometimes you go into those cycles of do more and then get injured, do more, get injured, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I think obviously we'll continue on this thread about your collegiate racing, but it didn't go well, right? And so, what were some of the things you learned from your time at the University of Washington, maybe about yourself and how you operate, but also maybe about like collegiate running and what it takes to get to the next level?
For the longest time, I think my coach in high school was incredibly diligent. My coach Besnick and Tatiana from Vancouver Olympic Club, they were amazing, but they kind of treated me like a professional athlete, which was amazing. But they were so in tune, like watching my stride, like how I felt, like did I look fatigued on the day? They would customize entire weeks of training for like almost the group, it seemed, based on like how I felt sometimes. And so like I just had to show up and give effort, right? And then they would hold me back. And then, transitioning to university, like you don't really have a system internally to check yourself of knowing, am I going too hard? Like, am I leading this workout? Am I overdoing it? Like, the coach doesn't necessarily have the time. And it's not really that they don't care. They don't have the time to say, you should be adjusting your paces by 3 seconds per K slower or something like that within a tempo. And everyone's trying to get approval. Everyone's trying to get their travel spot on a cross country team. So it's like, sometimes you're tempoing for your life, And so I didn't really have a sustainable system and sustainable understanding of training to be able to stay healthy and enjoy it kind of long term. And so I think I went through a lot of like highs and lows like that. My first cross country season in college was actually like pretty positive, and the first half of my first track season. So, I was redshirted for my first cross season, but I think I ran like 8:15 and for the 3K pre super spikes in a fitness like time trial for like all the guys that weren't going to NCAAs by the end of the season. And I was pretty stoked with that. And then I think I came 4th at Canadian cross country nationals that year. And there was some pretty solid guys in front of me in that race. So yeah, I was pretty stoked with that. And that qualified me for the junior Pan Am cross country team. But then again, it's just like, I got into a cycle of, I have to do more of something to get better. I remember finishing that cross country race in that first college year after Canadian nationals. And I was like, okay, now it's time to like train twice as hard. And I was internally like, I need to kind of lose some weight. Like it was like things like that where I was like, has to be the goal to get to that next level. And then again, like instead of just keeping a sustainable system or something like that, I didn't really have a precedent, and I was trying to push myself into a new uncomfortable zone. And that new uncomfortable zone was like me under eating. And then I was like constantly fatigued. And then I was like, I don't even know what's up and down. So I didn't even know like what was, how to go harder, go easier. My coach was wondering what the heck's happening for that indoor season leading up to junior Pan Ams. Somehow put it together. But again, I had a good system, and then I was just like, no, we gotta mess that up.
One thing I want to pick up on, and this is, unfortunately part of the darker side of training and sport here, but we're starting to see more and more men come forward with what you experience, right? Disordered eating, red S, and the side effects that leads to. And from our work together and my clinical world, that's one of the areas that I work on in particular, and I push, right? Like even when we're talking marathon stuff all the time, it's like, are you feeling, are you getting your 80 to 100 grams, right? And so how did you kind of find yourself in the midst of that, and what were the ramifications of doing that like so young in your career?
Yeah, so I guess like well, the ramifications were, maybe 7 stress fractures, 2 sacral stress fractures, red S, where the doctor is monitoring everything you do and sidelining you, and well, you run like garbage. So that's the bad side of things. I think there was a certain point within second year where I just like I was like this one particular night was like absolute rock bottom. I was injured, I was sad, I was like felt lonely. I think it was just like I had no sort of feeling. I was just totally my mind was just grayscale. Everything was monotone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, that's rock bottom. So anything a little bit better than that is an improvement. And we were sort of coming back into things, and eventually I transferred back home. And when I transferred back home, it's like, okay, well, you're not at this big school. There's no big expectations. Like you have to qualify for regionals. You're sleeping in your parents' basement. It's like, if you're getting out for a run, that's good. No one had really made me sort of any training until, like I started back at UBC. And, I guess during that time, it was like, that was a full reset.
Mm-hmm.
So I already experienced rock bottom. Anything better than that was good. And that's kind of why I'm like totally open to sharing that from thereafter about Red S and all that stuff. It's just because I'm like, I really just don't care. Like I've experienced that. We're past it. And then from there on, I think like, it's just like, I just enjoyed being able to get out there and crush bigger workouts. And I enjoyed that way more than trying to adhere to some like perfectionist mindset of like, this is what I have to look like, and in order to perform better, which obviously wasn't even the right equation to be buying into in the first place.
It's funny, like we've come a long way, right? Because our first days at UBC coincided the same, right? Like you came back to UBC and I started coaching at UBC like the same season, same time, right? Obviously it was home for you, it was a big move for me, but I was thinking about this in preparing to talk to you today. Do you remember our first conversation that summer before I got to campus, like after I just got the job and you and I had connected?
I don't totally remember all the details, but I remember like sharing. And actually, I think that was actually one thing. One thing I do remember was one of those first conversations. Like I told my coach in second year that like, hey, I'm like, I don't really know how to say this, but I'm kind of going through this phase of having like an eating disorder, and like I'm trying to get it under control. I'm seeing therapy, blah blah blah. And he was just like, okay, cool, but like I don't really care. Like that was like, he didn't. I mean, maybe didn't exactly say those words, but he was just like, he didn't care. And so
Yeah.
when I told you, and I was like, yeah, I'm trying to get this under control more. Like you were like, okay, yeah, totally understand. This is something that like we've talked about with like other athletes in the past and blah blah blah. And I think that was like the most surprising reaction. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, no one's ever responded in that way. Yeah.
I remember that part, and I'm glad I was able to be there for you. I didn't know much about your situation at the time, but one of the other things I remember at the back of that conversation, I have this weird memory. I was at National Track Champs in Ottawa, and I was in the Airbnb upstairs. I can tell you exactly where I was. My memory's weird like that, but I remember saying to you, "Hey, if you get this like sorted out, and we have a good couple years, like you could be a really good marathoner." And I think that's funny now because we're looking back like 2 years into marathon training now, and you've had quite a successful like two races, third coming up here, right?
Yeah.
But I think I want to be clear, that wasn't me, foreshadowing or me being some sort of a genius. I think that was you recognizing like, hey, I have an opportunity to do this stuff if I work through my demons and slay my dragons. So kudos to you on doing that, because it's not easy, right? I know you've probably seen plenty of people along the pathway not come back from that, right?
Yeah. I think as I get older every year, I both see my obsession to do more, or obsession to never take a day off, as like both a blessing and a curse. it's
Yeah.
something like where I get up each morning to run, and I'm like, okay, well, we breathe, I breathe. If I don't run today, it's like not breathing. So that's both been
Yeah.
good, and it's kept me like always getting out there to be consistent. And as a result of that, I think it's really paid off for the marathon long term, and I'm not giving up, because I do find it unfortunate that so many guys drop off right after college, and especially an event like the marathon, like it's just everything just compounds over time. And I've been fortunate to work with you, and we've been able to minimize how much of the lows we have to how deep we go into that low, and then maximize on the highs, but over time just kind of staying with it and then progressing over time too. So yeah, I think as I get older, just wishing more guys just stuck with it, because the dividends just compound over time.
Absolutely. And obviously I want to thank you for sharing this stuff, because there's not nearly as many men who have gone through this, like sharing those struggles. And I think it's good for the next crop to see that like red S is a thing. Some of these like mental distractions and things that are going on are a thing, and it's okay to solve through them. It's normal. We don't want it to be the thing that continues on, but normal in the sense that it's happening. You're not weird or alone. And so if I can bridge that into a topic I wanted to ask you about, in terms of like the mental chatter and noise that you have as somebody who's trying to reach the pinnacle of the sport. And so I know you and I have talked about it, like we're trying to map out, okay, how can we get you the best chance possible to LA 2028, right? We're always working through that for the year. What are the best options? You're coming with races, I'm coming with races, and we're trying to map that out. And so with that, having seen it kind of firsthand with other athletes I've coached or mental performance coaching, that chatter that comes with it, what is that like for you? Like, I mean, I know because we've talked about it, but whatever you're comfortable sharing about, like some of the doubt and chatter that goes on when you're chasing these big, crazy, audacious goals.
I think over the years, I was not very invested in school. I had to change programs a number of times through the transfer process, and I don't think that necessarily helped either. I was never very school driven. Any single job, internship, summer work program, I was a killer A player though. So I think when I left school and joined like the working world, the business world, that actually I had to sort of adapt a little bit, especially when moving from Vancouver to Ottawa. But over time, that's honestly like kept me busy, and also like diversifying my identity to a sense where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think before, and when I was younger, 5, 6 years ago, like looking at, say like marathon project, your peak race coming up in December, and we're like August, and I'm like, man, that's so long. And it's just like, and now I'm in the moment where it's just like, I have other projects that take up my mind that I'm passionate about. So I'm more so focused on like, getting the most out of each week, each day, and kind of, yeah, sticking my head down and just thinking about, hey, what's coming up the next few hours, what's coming up tomorrow, and that sort of thing. So I think it's a lot easier to go through that mental dialogue. And I think over time, those doubts, and whenever I've had a bad workout, when I used to have a bad workout, I occasionally have it. I call it like a Cam Levins moment, where I'm like literally like just like screaming at the ground. Like there's that episode that I love in Driven where he's frozen ice cold doing K repeats, and I'm naturally
On the track they shoveled out for
yeah,
him. Yeah.
yeah. I'm naturally like an angry person, especially towards myself, and so I do have those moments, but they're a lot. There's a lot fewer of those now. And when I do have a bad workout, I think between you and I, we have such a consistent system, a consistent plan. But I also know like how to back off, what things I can do, how to get more sleep, balance out my routine to sort of course correct for that. So it's kind of like, I think you and I have sort of built out those tools over time, where it's like, oh, bad workout, use this tool, use this tool. I think another thing you've said over time is like, controlling the controllables. And so, really buying into that. But yeah, diversifying identity, kind of just thinking in the moment, control the controllables, all these little things that I picked up over time to use when I need it most, has been cool. Cause you feel a lot more in control, and you don't have to do any like crazy things like run a, like all your, 30% of your mileage in a single day just to like validate to yourself you're still fit or something like that.
I love like watching your growth and seeing it. And I remember saying to you when we first started having the conversation about the marathon, because you were quite young, really, relatively. Like a lot of people continue on with the track stuff, right? And I said to you, we should give the marathon a try this year. See if you have aptitude to it. If not, we just come back, right? No harm, no foul, right? And I think we're probably pretty clear you got some aptitude towards the longer stuff now. But I want to pull apart. You might hate this a little bit, but I want to pull apart the week leading into Ottawa 10K champs, because I remember getting text that week being like, "I'm out of shape. I'm not fit enough. I can't do this." Like, and just so everybody listening, like, this is our in Canada 10K champs, and you might think of us as that like little country, kind of on top of America who has every like so runners every once in a while. But like, there was legit people in that race, right? Like, I think what, 3 of the people in front of you were Olympians, right? And the other one was a 210 marathoner. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it was one in the Canadian record of I think like 28:07. So yeah, it was pretty
Right.
solid race.
Massive, right? And so, fair enough. It's your hometown, your adopted hometown, I should say now, right? You're there. Spring in Eastern Ontario sucks with the wind and the heat coming up. And I remember that week you texted me, "I don't know if I'm fit. Maybe I'll just train through it," kind of thing. And so, I don't bring that up to make you seem like you suck or anything, but I want to normalize that. Like, even people at your level, right, struggle with that. So if you can recall some of that, can you walk me through kind of how we navigated that, or how you navigated that, and then we can talk about what you actually did at Ottawa.
I think like especially leading up to like the kind of like the 10K phase that we were doing, everything was like familiar to me, or I like pretty much every single week I felt like I was crushing workouts pretty much. Like the Houston build, like there was some tough stuff in there, but it was kind of weird, like where in the winter, because it was like treadmill work, it was almost like a more controlled system. Like I knew like, hey, we're going to do 10 or 12 by, a K at tempo in the afternoon. It's a double threshold day on a Tuesday. And I was like, I know I'm going to feel like this. I'm going to basically hit within like a couple seconds these splits. And it's like, you don't have wind, you don't have humidity, like you have your water right there. Like, and it was honestly a pretty perfect system for training. And for those that don't know, like Ottawa is pretty wild in the sense that you run on the canal and somehow you can run out and back for like 2 reps and somehow experience wind in both directions.
Every direction.
Which is crazy. And then there's heat and humidity and all that stuff coming about too. So I think that particular week and the week leading before it, I was feeling great some days and then cooked other days. And I think there was one workout where I was trying to hit like some sort of 1K, 2K repeat workout. And
yep.
I was like, man, I am going to the well, I'm going to the arms, and I'm just trying to hit like tempo pace at this point.
Yeah, like 3-minute Ks.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
And so, yeah, just a lot of doubt there. And I think, I've had quite a few of those moments. And I think what I've appreciated most is that I, for myself internally, like to make a lot grander, like course corrections of like, hey, let's just drop this, or like instead of like a 1 hour, 40-minute day of doubles, like let's cut it down to 60 minutes or something like that. And I think you sort of like balance that out a lot better to just stay the course. Now that race was pretty freaking hard to run 28:58. And it hurt a lot because I don't think I was as used to the 10K, but it paid off. So that was what I appreciated that week for sure.
So what did you learn from that week, our conversations, and then going out and breaking 29 minutes on the road, right? To be clear, on the road, not the track, right? This is road champs, right? On a legit course, not a net downhill course, not something like a legit 10K course. What did you learn from navigating the like, oh crap, I can't even run tempo pace, like, what was it? I think it was 8-9 days out that workout, I think, right? And then going and running your fastest time ever over 10K on the road or track, right? And so what did you learn from that kind of process?
I think just trying to like stay the course, and then really just even on the day of, just like taking it like almost like an hour at a time. Like it's like, oh, this is what I feel on my shakeout. Like, cool. Don't really know what to expect. we're just going to go out there and put in effort. And like, this is how we feel during the like tempo pickups right before the race. And it's like, okay, you feel like this, like this seems promising. You're full of caffeine. Like, I think that'll do. I think we're on a good track, but just take it one moment at a time. And even the start of the race, that first 2K was absolutely brutal. I was like, this is not going to be a good day. And then I looked down my watch and it's like, okay, well, we're running like 241 per K, a very different.
Can you put that in miles just for everyone else? 241.
I don't know. pretty.
I don't know off the top of my
pretty
head.
Quick, but
pretty quick. 440s, yeah.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe like we'll just like let some of these guys come back to us. And so it's again like not even hour by hour, but like just K by K, just taking it in the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, just breaking that down and just staying the course and then just like, hey, like what would make my, I think we had this conversation too, where it was like, what would make me happy by the end? And I was like, okay, by the end of this race, if I gave a good executed race and maximum effort by the end, where I was throwing myself over the line, to some extent, I was like, I'd be happy with that.
And I think what's really cool about that, I mean, I talk about this all the time, and you know this, but for those listening, is like trying to get you and all the athletes I work with thinking about the process more than the outcome. And I think that's a really hard thing in our world, because our sport is defined by like standards, right? Like, here's the Olympic standard, hit it or don't, and you're going or not, right? Boston qualifiers, PRs, everything, right? But when we zoom back out, which is one of the tools you use all the time, and look at the process, and am I getting better? Am I doing the right things? Is it coming together, right? Oftentimes the outcome takes care of itself in our sport, right? Now you got to still train, to be clear. You can't just think about the process and not train. But, for you, I thought that week in particular was a really great lesson in that. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
And so if we like flash forward 2 weeks, was it 2 weeks or 3 weeks later? You had Toronto 10K, right?
Yeah.
And so we go from great weather in Ottawa, right? And you got, all these kind of, big names in front of you, to horrible weather in Toronto with the wind, right? And so 10K, right? Same fitness, same kind of idea there, right? How did you navigate and change kind of your mindset from, okay, I don't know how fit I am. Okay, wow, I'm actually really fit. I just ran a PR, to like, okay, this is supposed to be a faster course, so let's get after it. Because I think we talked about running like 28:40, 28:45 there, right? And then we show up that day, crazy stupid wins, right? So how did you kind of, change that mindset and idea about performance on that day, knowing that everything we talked about after Ottawa to like literally the day before Toronto was trying to run 28:45, to showing up and being like, well, that's not possible, so I guess that plan's out in the garbage. How did you kind of navigate and make that switch?
I definitely was hungry for more that season, and I think knowing that course now, I think it's historically just been like that. So I'll just readjust my expectations for the future. Yeah, I think a similar thing where I knew, across all the races, my average of the last like 6 races, that showing up on the day, like, even if I had to muscle through it, I had the worst sleep. I've slept great before all my races. And
that's right. You said that. Yeah, that's right.
All my races the past like 2 years. This one race, I don't know, that hit me like a brick. I was not ready. I even bought a coffee right after warm up, because I was just like, I was so out of it. And I think even in that moment, I was just like, okay, just again, get by it K by K, no matter how you feel. And I was like, I knew coming into the last 2K, I'm like, okay, with the guys around me, which was, some fairly talented guys, that that I could show up when it mattered most. But I think it was through so much consistency across those last, 8, 9, 10 races over the last year, that I was like, okay, I think I can bet on myself here. And then, just breaking that down into like, this is where I'm at this K, this is where I'm going to be at the next K. And just, I think especially in that race, I was like, okay, I just need to get to 7K feeling like this. I just need to get to 8K feeling like this. I just need to get to 9K feeling like this. And then they like, one guy, Lee, started going. And so I was like, okay, I might as well just try to kick. And
I love that story. And it was one of the reasons I wanted to bring, those 2 races, that juxtaposition up, because, I talk to you and other athletes about this all the time, but confidence is kind of like earned from trusting the training and doing the hard work, right? So it's like, okay, you got to consistently do the work. That's the first piece, right? Because if you're not doing that, you're not going to be confident, right? And then with that consistency, that builds competence, right? So now you're competent that you can go out and execute workouts and build and such, and then you gain confidence. And I think, if we break down kind of what happened in that race, I think this year, more so than any other year I've worked with you, you've really derived that confidence from the work that you've done. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, for sure. I think I don't know. I think there was a certain turnaround point where I started building sort of that like a new sort of layer of confidence. I think that was 2023. Went away to Australia, had a really good block of training, and from there something sort of
Mm-hmm.
switched. Kind of, I fell off mentally for the Philly Marathon, and then 2024 just really started to turn things around.
Yeah. And so let's bump up now to kind of what you're doing now with the marathon. And so one of the biggest things I want to highlight is you're an elite, right? You're chasing the dream, right? We've talked about this going to LA 2028 is the big goal right now. And you also work full time, right? So how do you navigate working full time? I know how demanding that is for you and the project work and such you do. But I think at least for the last 6, 7 weeks, you've averaged over 210 kilometers a week. So I don't know what that is in miles, 130 miles, give or take. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's good question right there. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so let's see. I think I made a very distinct decision like right after college where I was like, man, remote work is gold, and I kind of frame it like, hey, everyone else is commuting to work while I'm just running around and commuting back to the same destination. So there's a bit of that. I'm super appreciative of my girlfriend Irie. I mean, like the number of times where during the week she's the one cooking dinner, and then like, okay, I swear I'm going to pay you back. I'm going to cook dinner on the weekend. But yeah, very, very grateful there. So I think a super understanding partner goes a long way.
Yeah.
The right setup and the right job also helps a lot. But I do work full time. I'm the head of go to market for an outreach agency. And yeah, I think it's, just finding an optimal system. I know that if I get over 7 hours of sleep per night, that I'm going to feel good the next day. Anything closer to 8 is a bonus. And then just really trying to build like some sort of repetitive routine that I can follow over time. But it's definitely an art. And I've said this to my own athletes that I coach to and friends. It's like, for me, like running is not the hard part. Like I had people messaging
Yeah.
me all the time, like, hey, do you want to like link up for workouts, go for a run? It's like, honestly, like 200K, 250K, I think I could do it mentally, and I could do it all solo. Like that's no worries for me.
Yeah.
I could do that all day. All this other life stuff and showing up for work and like like that's the hard stuff to schedule. And so
Yeah.
but it does give me a reprieve from thinking about running too. So it's a balance, and I think work life balance is a myth. So that's something I'm pretty firm on, but we can get as close
Yeah.
as we can to a good routine and a sustainable routine of work life balance too.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The reason why I asked that because I think there's this misconception. It was actually one of the reasons I want to bring this question up is I had one of my athletes who was asking me about like, some of the elites I work with, and he was like, "Oh, like they like literally the quote was, they just must just like train and nap all day." And I was like, "No, actually, my guy running like 120 miles a week literally has a full time job just like you." And to be clear, I don't say that to like shame anybody who's not running 120 miles a week, doing it, but just I think it's important, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, like the athletes who drop out after college because they're like, well, I can't train and work, and it's like, no, like you absolutely can. I know multiple elites that are like doing that, right, including Olympians and Olympic hopefuls. And so, thanks for sharing that and such. And so, do you look at it and go, okay, what are some of the trade-offs I have to do to navigate this lifestyle?
Yeah. I mean, I do think I like I've optimized as much as I can towards the lifestyle. I think when I started, dating Irie, like I started to make a more of those trade offs, and that kind of brought me down to earth a little bit more, and in a really good way.
Yeah.
Grant Fisher had like a great quote that he had, and he was like, like sometimes I might have to work or like put in the homework, like a couple more hours a night, and that might bring up my GPA by like point one, point two, and sometimes that's a worthwhile cost I have to make. And on the other end, I might lose like a few seconds on my like 5K time on the next race. And it's just like, that's just kind of part of what you have to go through. But it's like, usually it's a worthwhile trade-off over time. You just kind of have to double down on when's the big days that count most. And I think some people aren't ready to make some of those trade-offs, or they don't understand like if they can manage. I remember talking to a guy who used to be a great college runner and in his really early days, or high school runner, and he's like, man, I could never run over 100 miles if like I wasn't sleeping over 8 hours a night. I don't know how you do that. Yeah. Or, it was like over 10 hours or something. It was something like crazy like that. I was like,
wow.
I don't know. That's just like that's your like mental expectation like that. I don't know if that's actually like in practice what you have to do. So
absolutely. And I think, I think this, but I want to ask this question of you. Do you think training in solitude has actually allowed you to be a better trainer and as such a better racer?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. I think, I think that my desire to hammer the pace has, it's gotten much more in control over time. I think if I was within a group of guys, I have a much higher propensity to race it or try to want to drop them or like show fitness and stuff like that. Whereas when I'm alone, I feel the difference of what it's like to run with a guy or run behind a bike. And I actually think I slow myself down by like 1 or 2 seconds per K. And that's actually a more optimal training zone. And even still, there's some days where I get too excited. So I honestly need the handicap a little bit. And that keeps me in the perfect training zone for adaptations over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if we go into the X's and O's here for a minute, like, I think this is what a lot of people, especially age groupers, don't recognize. And I want to be clear. I love run groups. I got a run group in town we run with Friday Friday. It's the best thing in the world. And there's run groups popping up all over. And I love that it's getting people into running, right? But they are typically hammerfests, right? And so when you look at the training of elites and people like yourself, like, I get it. I give it to you and I see all your data. But I don't think people realize, like, your marathon pace is close to, give or take, 3:10 per kilometer, right? Give or take. We'll see how this goes, right? But you run most of your easy pace at like 5-minute Ks, 8-minute miles, right? So you've got almost a 3-minute, just shy, 3-minute gap between marathon pace and easy pace runs per mile, right? And I think I tell you this, I screenshot your training all the time on Final Surge and I send it to athletes when they're talking about like wanting to run their easy days faster. I'm like, it literally does not matter. If this guy who's trying to run 2:12, something like that this year, can get benefit running 8-minute miles, you can certainly run slower than 8-minute miles. And I want to be clear, I'm not bashing my athletes as part of the educative process, but can you talk about what you've learned? Because I would say it's really been the last maybe year and a half, year and 3/4 since we've really kind of gone into the marathon that you've made that shift. And so why has that been, and what do you think you've taken away and learned from that?
I actually didn't know that you do that. So that's that's actually pretty interesting. But there's like an interesting thing I noticed in college was just like when I was like kind of like a leadership member, team captain type figure for UBC. It's like even if you don't say the right things, and even if you're like maybe not like the best social character. You like usually that aligns cap like some sort of leadership member but especially if you're the star example or like you're the fastest or like whatever, people will look up to you and the group does follow. And so like that, I do think that helps. I was fortunate to have like John Gay and Kieran Lum, to when I went back to UBC, and I was like, okay, well, I didn't even actually follow what they did when I first got back to UBC, but it was like, there was a certain point where I was like, man, this is so dumb. Like I used to race Kieran and we used to be like step for step, or I was beating Kieran. And then I was like coming to UBC and it's like, man, this guy's running 7:45. I am way not running 7:45 right now. Why am I not doing more of what he's doing? And I remember him taking easy days, like super easy. And so Tom's Broach too, great example of that as well. And like, everyone was like, trying to flex on Strava, and these two guys are just like, nope, I'm just gonna run my easy days easy. And so I just started buying into that. And then it's like, oh, wow, this works. So that was one sort of phase. And then I think we went through, there's a couple like major shifts. So I think the first major shift was that first summer, 2019, where we bumped mileage a lot. And then I think the bump in mileage for the marathon, those two bumps that I experienced, my brain mentally was like, oh, coach says run 60 minutes, I'll run 70 minutes. Like that was my brain for like my entire life. And then the shift that I experienced where it was like, oh, like this is actually a lot of training. My brain doesn't actually crave doing more anymore. Like it's like this is actually like satisfying my needs, which was apparently it was like either 100 miles or 120 miles given the year. But yeah, so those were two interesting shifts, and then also just like following by example of people that I looked up to.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool point because I've talked about this before. There's like really a belief effect in good coaches, and I want to be very clear here. What you came into was because of CJ. Like you and I stepped in at the same time, but when you talk about Thomas Broach, Kieran Lom, John Gay, those guys, and that kind of belief effect that you coming in could look up and go, hey, I want to do what they're doing, right? And if I just do this, I can get there too, right? And that was CJ. I think CJ is one of the most underrated coaches in Canada. I love CJ. I hope he gets to listen to this podcast because he deserves, as the kids would say, all the flowers for that. And so I think it's cool that you were able to see that, and that like all three of those guys were and continue to be such great mentors for the next crop of Canadian guys. So
like whether it's like someone you look up to or whether it's a coach, like I think you just need that coach that's like, even when you do the dumb stuff, like they're just understanding. And I think like you especially, but also Kieran and John, like I think they saw me do like so many dumb workouts and things, and then catching up on easy runs. They were just like, yeah, man, well, maybe you should try it like this next time. And like beyond appreciative of that. Like that, I think that's the only reason that I was able to continue to progress past 2020 was because of people like those three mentioned. So yeah,
absolutely. Okay, marathon training. Let's talk about that because that's been, I think, really fun for you. I hope. Now we debuted in Philly, right? 219 hilly course. We specifically picked that one because it was like off the radar. You could just go debut. You had a little bit of a Icarus moment in that. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I think for the longest time I wanted to train like I feel like Cam Levins is just so godly fit, and so no matter how he runs the race, it's he can still muscle his way through. And I wasn't in that space that season. That was probably the first season where I missed a couple runs, which is like out of like the last 10 years, that's like crazy for me. So that season, the build, like I wasn't exactly perfect there, but I was trying to push the limit, and I didn't exactly have the ideal base that I wanted, but mostly just because I didn't execute what was on the training plan. But yeah, that was definitely a wake up call. I remember finishing, and then I was like, damn, like we have work to do. And that was tough because that's a tough moment to finish a marathon. Your legs feel like bricks. And I remember walking back the last 2 miles to the hotel with you, and I was like, man, this is far. And then and then you have to let your body recover for the next like 3 weeks. And it's just like you can't just get back into training and start hammering stuff to get better. It's like you gotta wait and sit with your thoughts for a while. So that was good. That was a good reset. And I was like, I am never going to skip a double or run in my life ever again after that. Like that was a turning point for me. And yeah, so I took that into 2024, but yeah, good learning moment for sure.
Absolutely. And so if we look at your next one up, Toronto, right? Pretty lonesome course, although the aforementioned Thomas Broach and you two ran together for I think probably 41.5 of 42.2 kilometers, I think it was, give or take, where you ended up running 2:15. And I think at least I think you thought this, but I think that was kind of your first glimpse where it's like, okay, we didn't have pacers, we kind of were just out there, it was a little bit windy and heating up in the second half, but you ran a really like great race. You were, fifth Canadian, once again in a great field. Like we're I think it's the golden era of Canadian, men's distance running right now in particular. And so walk me through kind of how that one went, what you learned, what you took away from that Toronto performance.
Yeah, man, that was, I mean, start to finish. I think that was a great experience. Like the whole build, we were trying new stuff. I think the thing I tell other people, and I actually tell other people that if their coach isn't doing this, like they should take some serious considerations here. But you constantly optimize for what is like the upcoming challenge and change up the stimulus to maximize fitness season by season. So it's like I feel like so many coaches, they figure out one formula and they just keep defaulting to that formula. So we were trying like a little bit of new stuff. And I think early on, I saw the system like really work. There were some really sexy workouts in there, a lot of not sexy stuff too, where actually even right now, I'm trying to think back to that and get my head into that mindset of just like running a 60-minute marathon session at effort, not by the watch. So I need to get back to that mentally actually right now. But yeah, and then Toronto is just like you work for a long time and then you get the result. So like it's like you A plus B equals C, and you're like, that's pretty reaffirming that half your year was devoted to that and it works. So yeah.
It's so true. Like the marathon truly is, I think, one of the greatest tests in delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Like think about it, 3 months roughly, give or take, right, for the build. Then you do the race. But it's not just that. You're also putting potentially another month or two, depending on how you recover, how the race goes, where the calendar is, of not racing.
Yeah.
Like that's 4 to 5 months of your year dedicated to one slightly longer than 2 hour thing, right? And especially when you're putting in 120 miles a week, you extrapolate that out. That's a lot of miles for 26 miles, right? So kudos to you on that one. What has been some of your favorite marathon workouts and experiences thus far? Because we've done a lot over the 2 builds, and we're getting ready to go into another one here for the marathon project. I think we can say you're doing the marathon project this year. That's been finalized, right? But what have been some of your favorite experiences, workouts, moments in the marathon that, like, if it all ended today, and knock on wood it doesn't, but if it all ended today, you would love to look back on?
I think there's some of those like long grinding sessions, and sometimes I think after trying double threshold, it kind of like I used to like crave those longer, like 70 minutes at marathon or 60 minutes at marathon or something like that. But those sessions, just they always, you always get a lot from them if you execute them right, and you learn so much about yourself through those sessions. So I gotta love some of that stuff. Some of the classic like tempo work, like just when you can see a glimpse of where you're at from comparison year to year. Like this time last year, or like last week Tuesday, I think we did like 40 or 50 minutes of tempo work. This time last year, or 2 weeks ago, or last week Tuesday, we did like 5 by 10 minutes of tempo. So you kind of see different elements of like that, and I think that's pretty cool. Like whenever you can build on these workouts and you're like, wow, I all this mileage is like making me so much stronger. I can put together workouts that I never could have dreamed of in college. So that's pretty cool. And then some of those, we did one session. We've done this session a couple times. It's like the tempo alternating with steady state, 1K on, 1K steady state float. Yeah, you feel like you're like Superman after something like that. So yeah, a few different sessions combined together, but all placed at like the right times. You're just like, yeah, I don't know. It just keeps it fun, keeps it interesting, but it's all the right sort of building blocks you need to. So looking forward to more of those for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, like, we have experimented a little bit, but I think everything I try to do holds true to, what I kind of call the hierarchy of marathon success, right? So it's like total aerobic volume. That's just a non-negotiable. Anything that takes away from that, we have to kind of omit, right? And then it's like, okay, your marathon or peri-marathon pace, right? Because we do some of that in and out stuff, right? But like that's the next block, right? And then it's like tempo running, and then it's like speed stuff, right? Because the marathon's a long distance race. We have to have that aerobic ability, and probably get skewered here. It's like, yes, we do some speed work in the marathon. Tom is still doing 3K 5K pace stuff. He's still doing strides and stuff, but as a proportion of importance, we rate the total volume and the marathon pace and the tempo stuff ahead of that. And so I think for anybody listening who's trying to navigate, okay, maybe you have a coach, maybe you don't, how do I put together training for a marathon? I think that hierarchy is really helpful, because for most people, you'll get a lot out of doing that, right? Doing it in the right order, the right proportions, controlled with like, intensity discipline. And so that's really what we've been trying to do. Now, are we pushing the envelopes? I think as you get closer to 210, 212, maybe there needs to be a little bit more intensity built in, depending on the year and the build and kind of where your gaps are. But what do you think of that? Do you see it the same way? Because I know you're coaching now, obviously.
Yeah, I've never seen an athlete not respond well to a bump in mileage, and either keeping some amount of the same intensity or even minimizing intensity. Because I think we switched to that like Wednesday, Sunday format. I honestly think mentally it's a lot easier too. Like mentally, you don't have to psych yourself up for like 2 workouts a week and a long run, something like that. So yeah, I think that's one key thing. But the volume definitely excites me. Yeah, I think for a lot of athletes, they try templated workouts and they see templated workouts online, and then they do too much intensity, and they don't really understand the importance of easy volume. And then they switch to working with a coach, and then they're like, oh wow, this works so much better, and I'm actually not injured. So there's a few things that you have to restructure in terms of how a person sees it. But you should see the gains like pretty soon. Like I think even this last 8-week block, I've already seen like the benefits of it as a whole. So yeah, I think I'm craving a little bit of intensity. So we did a bit of that last week, 2 workouts in the week in a long run.
Yep.
But yeah, like it's always the bread and butter to come back to.
And let's just wrap up so everybody can kind of follow along and watch. What's the race plans for the fall?
Yeah, so I think you probably see it more as a workout on Thursday, but for me mentally, chasing honor, chasing personal glory at the Glen Tay block race. So it's a 14.7K race. I got the course record last year. Shout out to your mentor and coach Steve Boyd, took his record. I need to get his age group record when I get older, and that's another
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be good to get under that. Last year was like 44:28, 303s, 302s, I think, something like that. We'll do Montreal half marathon, maybe more of a low key effort, and then Waterfront, Toronto half, and then the marathon project. I know a few guys that are confirmed, and they're pretty fast. So should be a lot of 209, 210, 211, 212, 213 guys in there is what I'm picturing.
Fantastic. And if all goes well, what are you looking to run?
Yeah, I think 211, 212 at worst is definitely what I'm shooting for, and I think that's more than I'm more than capable of that. Having run 63:06, so yeah, I'm excited, and I feel like that's acceptable to expect.
Awesome. And where can people follow along your journey?
Strava. Although some people have followed me on Strava, I've had many athletes say that they tried to copy my week day for day exactly as is. Don't do that. But don't do that. Strava, just Thomas Nobbs. Instagram, Nobbs. My last name is Nobbs. And yeah, I think that's like pretty much everything.
Awesome. And I hear you have an amazing group chat too, if you want to plug that.
Oh yeah, I guess yeah. If you DM me or give me a shout out, we have a run chat that mainly just talks about run meetups, races, favorite shoes you're wearing for running, just random weird running stuff.
And if any athletes listening would like to be coached by you, where can they find you?
Team Run is the site. I will take a application by application basis because I'm at pretty max capacity. I might divert you to Brant or Elena. But yeah, Team Run is phenomenal. Met some amazing coaches along the way. So can't recommend checking that out enough to any athlete looking for a coach right now.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for joining us. Maybe we'll have to do a follow-up post marathon project, and we can do a build breakdown for people so they can see kind of everything and how we navigate it.
Yeah, no, that'd be sweet.
Awesome, man. Cool. All right. Thanks a lot for joining.
Okay. Chat soon.